The German Federal Court of Audit demanded physical inspection of Germany's gold reserves stored in New York. The Federal Reserve refused. Then they stalled. Then they agreed to a limited repatriation schedule spread over 7 years for 300 tons of Germany's own gold. That refusal set off a chain reaction that most people completely missed. Because while the world watched cryptocurrency speculators and tech billionaires, 27 central banks quietly became net buyers of physical gold. Not paper gold, not gold certificates, physical metal. Bars moved from vaults in New York and London to vaults in Warsaw, Beijing, and Istanbul. The global gold repatriation movement represents over $200 billion in declared transfers. The actual number is higher because several central banks stopped reporting their gold purchases entirely in 2023. When institutions that print money start hiding how much gold they're accumulating, you're not watching a hedge, you're watching preparation. The question isn't whether the gold run has started. The question is why so few people understand what happens when it accelerates. Right now, everyone is focused on the price of gold, whether it breaks new records, whether it correlates with inflation or interest rates, whether retail investors should buy coins or ETFs. That's the right hand. The left hand is building a parallel reserve system, one that doesn't depend on dollar intermediation, SWIFT messaging, or Western custodianship. The physical movement of monetary gold from Western vaults to non-Western vaults represents the largest quiet restructuring of the global financial architecture since Bretton Woods. Germany didn't just ask for its gold back on a whim. The Bundesbank stored 3,000 tons of gold in foreign vaults during the Cold War. The logic was simple. If Soviet tanks rolled into Frankfurt, Germany's monetary reserves would remain beyond their reach. That threat disappeared in 1991. The gold stayed in New York and London anyway, for decades. When German auditors finally demanded to see their own gold in 2012, they were told inspections weren't possible. Security protocols, logistical constraints. When they pushed harder, they were offered a repatriation schedule so slow it implied the gold would need to be sourced rather than retrieved. That's when other countries started paying attention. This has happened before. In 1965, French President Charles de Gaulle announced France would convert its dollar reserves into physical gold and repatriate the metal from the United States. He didn't ask permission, he didn't negotiate, he sent the French Navy. De Gaulle understood something most economists refuse to acknowledge. The Bretton Woods system allowed the United States to print dollars backed by gold it promised to deliver on demand, but the number of dollars in circulation had quietly grown far beyond the gold available to redeem them. The math didn't work, it never worked. It only functioned as long as nobody called the bluff. France called it. Other countries began following. By 1971, the United States held 8,100 tons of gold and faced claims on over 50,000 tons worth of dollar liabilities.
Nixon closed the gold window. Bretton Woods collapsed. The dollar became pure fiat. This wasn't a policy decision. It was a forced move. The precedent is clear. When enough sovereign states demand physical settlement instead of paper promises, the system resets. It doesn't reform, it breaks and gets replaced. And the current gold repatriation movement is larger than the one that broke Bretton Woods. Most people think of gold reserves as static assets, bars sitting in vaults doing nothing. That's not how central banks use gold. Gold stored in New York or London can be leased, swapped, or pledged as collateral in transactions the host country never discloses to the owner. This is the gold lending market. Central banks lend gold to bullion banks at lease rates typically below 1%. Those bullion banks sell the gold into the physical market, use the proceeds to buy higher-yielding assets, then return the gold to the central bank at the end of the lease, in theory. The Bank for International Settlements estimates the gold lending market involves thousands of tons in outstanding leases at any given time. The structure allows the same physical gold to appear on multiple balance sheets simultaneously. The central bank lists it as reserves, the bullion bank lists it as an asset, the buyer of the leased gold holds it as property. This works perfectly until someone demands physical delivery. Germany's repatriation request required the Federal Reserve to either admit the gold had been leased out or scramble to source replacement bars. The 7-year timeline wasn't a logistical necessity, it was a procurement window. When the Netherlands repatriated 120 tons in 2014, they received bars with refinery dates from 2013, not Cold War-era bars, freshly cast replacements. The system depends on coordination, on trust, on every party agreeing not to ask for physical settlement at the same time. When that coordination breaks, the mechanism breaks, and coordination is breaking. The math is straightforward. Approximately 35,000 tons of gold are held by central banks worldwide. The United States claims 8,100 tons. Germany holds 3,350 tons. The IMF holds 2,800 tons. These are the largest officially reported stockpiles, but global gold ETFs represent another 3,200 tons of claims on physical metal. Gold futures markets trade 20 million ounces daily on COMEX alone. That's 622 tons of daily paper claims. The entire registered inventory available for delivery on COMEX is 320 tons. The ratio of paper claims to deliverable physical gold exceeds 60-to-1 on certain contract months. This ratio functions smoothly when only a small percentage of holders demand physical settlement. Futures contracts expire, ETF shares get traded, the gold stays in the vault. But when central banks start demanding physical delivery, they don't settle in cash. They take the bars, permanently. Poland repatriated 100 tons. Hungary repatriated all of its gold from London. The Czech Republic repatriated its reserves. Serbia, Slovakia, and Romania followed. China and Russia haven't disclosed their full purchases, but import data and mining output
suggest accumulation in the thousands of tons beyond their official reports. Each ton removed from London or New York is one less ton available to backstop the paper market. The math doesn't allow for a simultaneous rush to physical settlement. The gold doesn't exist in sufficient quantity, and the rush has already started. The immediate assumption is that gold stored in Western vaults is safer, better security, rule of law, established custody infrastructure. That assumption worked for 70 years. It stopped working the moment financial sanctions became a primary geopolitical tool. When Russian central bank reserves were frozen in 2022, every finance ministry on Earth updated their risk models. It wasn't just Russia watching. It was China, India, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and every country that suddenly realized their reserves weren't beyond political reach. Gold stored in New York can be frozen. Gold stored in London can be sanctioned. Gold stored in their own vault cannot. This isn't speculation. Executive Order 6102 in 1933 allowed the United States government to confiscate privately held gold from American citizens. The legal framework for asset seizure during declared emergencies remains fully intact. Foreign central bank reserves held in custody aren't even protected by the same legal standards as domestic assets. The Gold Reserve Act of 1934 and subsequent amendments grant the U.S. Treasury and Federal Reserve broad authority over monetary gold during national emergencies. The definition of national emergency has expanded to include financial instability, cyber threats, and pandemic response. Every central bank conducting repatriation has performed this legal analysis. The question wasn't whether their gold was safe in normal times. The question was whether it would remain accessible during abnormal times. And every institutional risk committee reached the same conclusion. It won't. The repatriation process unfolds in phases. The first phase was verification. Countries that hadn't physically audited their foreign-held reserves in decades began demanding access. When those audits revealed irregularities, substitutions, or delays, Phase 2 began. Phase 2 is controlled repatriation. Small amounts, manageable logistics, official explanations about modernizing storage or reducing costs. This phase allows central banks to retrieve gold without triggering panic or revealing the true scale of concern. Phase 3 begins when the controlled pace becomes insufficient. When geopolitical tensions spike or currency crises emerge, the calculus shifts. The cost of waiting exceeds the cost of urgency. This is when repatriation requests accelerate beyond the system's ability to fulfill them smoothly. We are between Phase 2 and Phase 3. The indicators are clear. Central bank gold purchases reached their highest level since 1967. Nations that historically held zero gold are building reserves. The dollar's share of global reserves has declined from 72% in 2000 to under 58% in 2024. The Shanghai Gold Exchange now trades higher volumes than COMEX off certain days. The system is rebalancing, not by policy coordination, by independent action from dozens of countries simultaneously reaching identical conclusions. That's not a trend. That's a phase transition. And phase transitions don't reverse. They complete. $200 billion gold run isn't a crisis. Not yet. It's a repositioning. Countries moving from a trust-based system to a possession-based system. From paper assurances to physical metal. From custodianship to sovereignty. Most people won't notice until it's complete. The financial media will report it as routine central bank activity, portfolio adjustments, diversification, until the day someone demands delivery and the vault comes up short. Until the gold lease market seizes, until a major bullion bank fails to return metal it doesn't have. The smart institutions aren't waiting for that headline. They're moving now, quietly, methodically, without public announcements or press releases. When Germany demanded its gold back, the message wasn't just sent to the Federal Reserve. It was sent to every central bank governor on the planet. Your reserves are only yours when you hold them. If this interests you, There's more coming. The mechanisms, the counterparties, the legal structures most people don't know exist. Subscribe if you want to see what happens when the repatriation phase completes. One question remains unanswered. When the vault runs empty, who gets the last bars?